Why people are no longer returning their shopping carts. What the reason could be for that. So I thought about it and decided there were a few different uh, distinct possibilities as to why. So the first is Idiocracy, right? So I mean, you might be familiar with that movie. I personally have never actually seen it, but whatever. I've heard of it, and I remember basically hearing about the general premise. Basically, the idea is that, contrary to popular belief, people are getting dumber, not smarter, and as a result, um, basically, okay, here's why that's happening. I should probably explain that part. So, it used to be throughout a vast majority of history that, you know, um, infant mortality was very high. And so, in order to survive and reproduce, people had to be smart, right? Because if they were dumb, then all their children would just die off. And typically, only the highest status of people had good kids. So, like, your ancestors were most likely, if not well off, then at the very least, very, very smart, right? Very high IQ. Whereas nowadays, with infant mortality being very low, that's just no longer the case. People in the modern day typically, um, okay, so, the people in the middle, especially people slightly above average, people with like, you know, 110, 120 IQ, they're basically not going to be interested in having kids at all. And the reason why is because, having kids is very expensive, time consuming, exhausting. And so, because infant mortality isn't high, it doesn't really take that much clever thinking or hard work or it doesn't take that much clever thinking, I should say, to keep them well off to begin with. It's basically to keep them alive, all you have to do is spend a bunch of money on them and spend a bit of time with them. So, like, they're most likely, even if you're a terrible parent, they're most likely going to survive into adulthood statistically. So, basically, as a result, the very dumb people are the most likely to have a lot of kids, right? Because they don't really think about that and they don't use birth control or condoms or anything like that whatsoever. And then the very smart are going to look at our aging, declining population and be like, oh, we need to have kids. And so they might have a couple, but it's not going to be nearly enough to offset all the dumb people having kids, and so society just gets dumber. Now that said, I intelligence isn't everything. There are dumb people who will put away their carts because ethically they believe it to be the right thing, but at the same time, putting away your carts is logically the right move. So statistically, people who are dumb are going to be less likely to put their carts away. So that's the first reason. The second reason, um, is populations getting less healthy. And by that, I don't necessarily mean obesity or anything like that. I mean, I do mean that partially, but that's not the full story. I also mean aging populations. I mean, because people on average are getting older, and older people are just inherently going to be usually less healthy than younger people, right? Like a healthy 70-year-old is going to be less healthy than a healthy 20-year-old. And people who are less healthy, less fit, right, are going to be less likely to put their carts away. And you can see this in like cart narcs videos and stuff like that, right? A lot of the people, not everybody, but a lot of the people who don't put their carts away are, they don't look healthy, right? They're often either very fat or very old. And that's because, they're just out of shape. They don't have the energy to put their cart away. So that's the second reason. The third is skepticism toward brands. And in many ways, this is actually a good thing, right? I'm glad, for example, that people are becoming much more skeptical toward big tech and stuff like that. But there is a hidden downside. Every good thing has a downside. And in this case, I would say the downside is people are just not going to want to follow the brand's rules, even if like it makes sense. So a common rationalization people use for not putting their carts away is, oh, they pay somebody to put it away, which is basically their way of saying, F you, corporation, I'm going to make you pay extra money and time to make somebody else put the cart away. And of course, I don't think that's a very good argument because by that logic, like you don't pee on the floor and say, oh, they pay somebody to clean that up, right? And like, before somebody puts it away, the cart's still going to be there causing problems for other customers, which, it's far more of a burden on them than it is for the brand running the store. But anyway, I think that's another reason. And then lastly, I would say just the fact that the last reason, and probably the biggest, is that people just care less about the common good in general, right? Like narcissism and traits like that are on the rise. And as a result, this has just led to people not really caring if they leave a card out and then it causes a dent in another car because why should they? They're special, right? They don't give a crap about other people.